Hello there out there in Facebook world, YouTube, and Twitter. Jay Cherry here. I have a few stories that I wanted to share with you guys today. I think that we are in this crazy time frame where the big tech industry is silencing. Sorry, I had that just repeated at me. Are silencing the news, the actual news, and things happening. So one of the people that they're silencing is Scott Atlas. So he is now on the Corona task force. Trump put him on the Corona task force. So I wanted to share with you some stuff about Scott Atlas. I also wanted to talk about South Dakota. Actually, I want to start with South Dakota, not Scott Atlas per se. Let me just do this real quick. So I wanted to share with you some interesting news and discrepancies in the way that the news is reported. So fascinating is that, here we go. Let me share this first story with you. This is, let me get this share screen. Bear with me, guys. I have a couple of technical difficulties here. So this is an article out of South Dakota on the recent cases in South Dakota. So you can find this article. I put it in my show notes on Facebook, and I'll be sure to add that to YouTube as well. So this article is coming out of South Dakota, and I wanted to share it with you because I want to contrast this to something else that I was reading earlier today. So they go on to talk about the cases and how they've had a rise in cases and such things like that. So I just wanted to bring you guys to this particular place in the article. While we have been working together to combat this virus, many other states have taken a very different approach. Some governors ordered their citizens to shelter in place. Others ordered businesses and churches to close. Some even sent nursing home patients who had the virus back into their facilities. Many said these steps had to be taken. They insisted that the approach we've taken, this is South Dakota, this is the governor of South Dakota speaking here, guys, and you can find this article in my show notes. So many said these steps had to be taken. They insisted that the approach we've taken, trusting the people to make the best decisions for themselves and their families, was wrong. The data says otherwise. New Jersey and New York, you can add Connecticut to that. I don't know why Connecticut is always left out of the equation, but Connecticut is always forgotten. But you can also add Connecticut to this. I'm just adding that in my own 2 cents into this quote that I'm reading for you here. Had the worst death rates, 183 and 171 per 100,000 respectively in the nation. Though every death is one too many, South Dakota's death rate is 37 per 100,000. Remains among the lowest in the nation. I want to continue on with this. As we expected, cases have gone up in South Dakota. Science told us that was going to happen. There is no way to stop the virus. But what's encouraging is that we're doing a much better job of identifying the individuals. She goes on to talk about, they have earlier interventions, but here I wanted to go and talk about this quote right here. Though we look forward to a time when COVID-19 is behind us, a one-size-fits-all approach remains elusive. This includes mandatory masking. In other places, from Los Angeles and Miami to London and Paris, cases have exploded despite the existence of mask mandates and other harsh restrictions. She goes on to say, there are times when masks are appropriate. For example, masks are a smart precaution when caring for a symptomatic person who is coughing or sneezing. Masks are also recommended in hospital settings. Data suggests that N95s can be effective when worn appropriately, changed regularly, fitted properly, and not touched. But if you're alone in a park or hunting in a field, risk of transmission is negligible without a mask. What I find so absolutely fascinating about this, and I'm going to show you the contrast in what's going on here. So that is coming from South Dakota, the rapidcityjournal.com, and I put that link on Facebook in the show notes, and I'll add that also into a thread on Twitter and also put that into the comments, or actually in the description on YouTube after I do this live stream. Now, I wanted to share with you guys this particular article. Now, this is like, hopefully I get this here. I had this all set up so that we could, oh, sorry about that, guys. So let me pull this next one up. So this is from Channel 3. And this Channel 3 is in Connecticut. I'm going to share the screen here with you guys. Just give me 1 second. Let me pull this up. So I'm going to try and blow this up a little bit too. Let me see if I can do that. Okay, hold on a second. You're going to see such a contrast in the way this is discussed. So this is an article that was on the WFSB news site here in Connecticut. And what's really interesting about this article is it goes on to talk about the cases. Sorry about that. I'm just doing a little tech thing here. So they had an article that came out today. I'm going to read you some of this article. It's like it's like we're in two different worlds. So they're talking about the rise in cases, the rise in, all the more people are being tested. So they're talking about a horrible winter. So I'm just going to add here. Some experts predict that the country's daily death toll, which usually lags behind rising cases, will also begin creeping upward, with more than 2,300 Americans could be dying daily by early January. According to a model by the Institute for Health Metrics and Evaluation at the University of Washington. Always follow the money. Oh, I just find that really, really interesting. So always follow the money, the University of Washington. Who is funding that study? What model? What are they basing this model on? Really interesting stuff. It's such a contrast to what I was just reading you. So I'm going to continue on a little bit further. In other words, it's going to be a horrible winter, according to Dr. Peter Hotez. People in the medical freedom movement know a lot about Dr. Peter Hotez. We've heard that name a million times. So he is one of the experts that is a big proponent of mandatory vaccination. So I'm not going to read all through this quote, because I wanted to get to the part about South Dakota to compare and contrast to what the governor of South Dakota was saying and what this article that was on the WFSB website. And all of this is in my show notes. You guys can go read this article yourself. So the surge also comes, and then they're talking about why it's happening. Okay, the surge also comes after many schools and universities reopened, and college towns and campuses all over the country reported outbreaks. And then the up-and-coming holidays that are making public health officials nervous, with household gatherings already helping drive the surge of cases. Experts worry large celebrations will continue to fuel the spread within American communities. Virtual celebrations are the safest route, infectious disease experts said. So I'm going to bring you down here, and they go on to talk about the other states, going to talk about Ohio and Wisconsin. I want to bring you up to South Dakota. So South Dakota holds the second highest rate of new cases per 100,000 in the country, according to data from Johns Hopkins. So here's the thing that they said. So it doesn't have to be this way. There's still time to turn things around, officials have said, with the help of basic public health measures touted by experts for months. Those include masks, social distancing, updated guidance from the Center of Disease Control and Prevention to close contact emphasis, just how critical face coverings are. The CDC's new definition of close contact with a COVID-19 patient includes exposures adding to a total of 15 minutes spent 6 feet or closer to an infected individual over a 24-hour period. Previously, the CDC defined a close contact as 15 minutes of continuous exposure to an infected individual. The change comes after a report from Vermont. Listen to this, guys. After a report from Vermont of a corrections officer who became infected after several brief interactions with infected inmates, none of them lasting 15 minutes, but adding up over time. The key point for people to remember is that there is no safe period of time to be with somebody who's not part of your bubble. Did you get that? Your bubble. If both of you are not wearing masks, public expert Dr. Anish Jha said Wednesday. So that was coming from the WFSB here in Connecticut, Channel 3. That was an article about the surging cases, the rising cases. I just want to go back to the to South Dakota. Here, let's just go back here. So I just want you to remember here what though we look forward to a time when COVID-19 is behind us, a one-size-fits-all approach remains elusive. This includes mandatory masking in many other places from Los Angeles and Miami to London and Paris. Cases have exploded despite the existence of masks. This is from the Rapid City Journal. Like I said, you can find these links in my show notes that I just put that I added to the comments on Facebook, and I promise I'll put show notes to the thread on Twitter and also add that to YouTube as well. So I've just found that so absolutely fascinating. So the other really fascinating thing I found is Scott Atlas, which I started to talk about at the beginning of the show, and I want to just give me a second here. I just want to pull up a little quote by him. Did I put that in here? No, I did not put that in. I'm going to take you right to the article. So this is an article. I'm going to share that with you guys. Hold on a second while I share the screen. So this is the article that Scott Atlas shared on Twitter. This is a great article. Let me see if I could blow it up a little bit so you guys could see that a little better. So there's a specific area that I wanted to quote for you guys. Hopefully you can read that with me. Let me get rid of this little ad if I can. Oh no, is that going to take me to the silly website? It's not letting me get rid of that silly ad. Okay, so let me see here. Can I get rid of that ad? Yes, I can. Goodbye, ad. Okay, so Scott Atlas has been selected to be a part of the coronavirus task force now, and he has the president's ear. Now, a lot of us who have been following the work of Scott Atlas, he is a very interesting person. He is a medical doctor. He is highly trained. He knows what he's talking about, and he has a lot of information and is very critical of these lockdowns and against the lockdowns. So I just wanted to read you about some of what he's talking about. And he's been censored on Twitter. So let me just pull up this quote real quick so that I have it for you, because I just want to read this important quote. And this is a long and lengthy article, so I just wanted to. Atlas discovered early Sunday morning that Twitter removed two of his tweets critical of mask mandates. The first tweet included, as Atlas explained, studies from Oxford Center for Evidence-Based Medicine, the WHO, and the Centers for Disease Control, as well as observational examples from Miami-Dade, Los Angeles County, Hawaii, and several countries where cases are rising despite near universal imposed mask mandates. So it's just absolutely fascinating. So he goes on to talk about how posts about hydroxychloroquine, including a tweet by the president's son, are also banned. The president's tweet this month claiming that the flu is as deadly as coronavirus 19 was flagged by Twitter for spreading misleading and potentially harmful information about the virus. But the only thing that's harmful to the public as the crisis continues is the suppression of information that, based on data, research, and experience, contradicts what the public has been brainwashed to believe. Okay, so now the left-leaning scientific and public health community decided back in January what would be accepted facts. 9 months later, as we know much more about the virus, who it impacts, and how to manage it, dissent is not permitted. Now, I know some people are going to be like, hey, you're picking on the left. Look, I'm not trying to pick on the left. I'm just trying to point out what's going on and the suppression of information from Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. They're even censoring information coming out with Hunter Biden's laptop. It's not about the fact that he was smoking crack. Look, addiction can afflict anyone. There is no judgment on that. That's not really, if all it was Biden smoking crack, I'd be like, that's Joe Biden's son. That's not something that is going to affect the future president if he is elected. That isn't something that really is relevant to the election. What is relevant to the election is the fact that Joe Biden and through Hunter Biden and Joe Biden were collaborating, and Hunter Biden was making deals, and his father was a part of these deals, and there's these emails in the laptop showing all this. I'm actually going to bring you guys over to Twitter now, and let's take a ride onto Twitter. Sorry as I get this adjusted. I gotta play you guys that video. Let me just touch on this. This is Connecticut. Before we get back over to some of the censorship, I just want to touch on this for you guys. The why the left is being criticized for being one-sided, suppressing information, and like being actually opposite of what they say they represent. So this is Mary Doherty. I'm sorry, I didn't mean Mary Doherty Abrams. And she is on the Public Health Committee. She's like a ranking member of the she's chair of the Public Health Committee. Take a listen to this, and then just take a look at this.
It would be to our detriment to pretend that the crisis is over or that we understand how to combat this virus when information is constantly changing. As you watch what happened in our country and even in some of our local communities, you can see that when you let your guard down, it's very likely that this virus will come back. There are times when we need to take swift and deliberate action as a government to protect the public's health, and the executive branch is best equipped to do that. I think our conversation here today amongst 10 members of the legislative body proves that point. There are 187 members of the legislative body, and the thought that we could all come together swiftly and deliberately to respond to what's come up with the COVID crisis is not realistic. To wish that the actions that we do today have different consequences is also not realistic. The consequences of our actions today will either mean that we continue down this path that we know has been successful, that is based in science, and that has protected the public, or we just go back to pre-March and start again.
Okay, so I wanted to share that with you, not to jump all over the place. Here, let me come back to here. I wanted to share that with you guys so I didn't get all over the place, but that is the chair of the Public Health Department here in Connecticut, and our governor has just been able to extend his executive orders, and they're ignoring science, okay? They're ignoring science, and big tech is suppressing information. I was just talking about the Joe Biden, Hunter Biden thing, and I don't want to even get too long into that at all, because that's not what this show is about right now, is about the whole scandal with Joe Biden. But just the point about the suppression of information and the fact that Scott Atlas, who is on the coronavirus task force, is offering up different science. I have something else I want to share with you guys here. Let me get over to this little jammy here. So I want to share this with you as well. I'm not going to play the whole thing, although I might play a part of it. It's about 11 minutes long. This is Dr. Scott Atlas, and this is on a podcast, and you can find this on Twitter if you're following me on Twitter. This is right here. I just retweeted this earlier today. Sorry that's not included in my show notes, and I totally should have done that, but I think I missed putting that link in there, and I'll try to add that to the show notes later on. But this is Scott Atlas, and he is being interviewed here by Freddie Sawyers, and it's interesting. So I'm going to play a bit of this. I might end up playing the whole thing. It's about 11 minutes long, and it's absolutely fascinating. I don't agree with everything Scott Atlas says. I don't agree with everything, but I agree with a lot of what he's talking about, especially when it's coming to lockdowns and mandatory medical procedures of any kind, and that means masking people, because that's a medical device, guys. And what's really frustrating is that Twitter is censoring him, taking his tweets down or blocking him. Twitter is censoring newspapers. Facebook is doing the same thing. They're censoring important, valuable stories that are... When did big tech get elected to be the arbiter of information? When did that happen? What are we not able-bodied enough to actually make conscientious decisions for ourselves without the big tech industry kind of squashing all of that for us. So let's take a look at this video. I'm not sure why it's not playing. Hold on a second, guys. No, I don't want an email. Here we go. Here it goes.
These are inappropriate and destructive policies. I'm sort of disgusted and dismayed at the state of things.
Hello and welcome. You are watching Lockdown TV from Unheard. And well, we've been talking a lot about herd immunity, about different coronavirus strategies, and one name that comes up a lot in this discussion is Dr. Scott Atlas. He joins us now down the line from the White House in Washington. Dr. Atlas, hi.
Thanks for having me. Nice to be here.
So you are a special advisor to the president and a member of the coronavirus task force. Who at the moment is making the decisions about White House policy on coronavirus?
The president. It's always been that way.
And how does the advice get to him? Are you now the kind of conduit of that collective advice? How do the different voices on the coronavirus task force combine to provide advice to the president?
Well, there are recommendations from a lot of places to the president. I am a person who has recommendations to the president. Various other recommendations and discussions are heard from the task force. He also listens to people from outside the government, outside the task force, inside the government. So there's a variety of people, which is appropriate because it's a complicated situation, and it's not just about one facet. It's in fact that's why I was brought in here, because my background is I'm a healthcare policy person, and I have a background in medical science, but I can my role really is to translate medical science into public policy. That's very different from being an epidemiologist or a virologist with a single sort of limited scope or limited view on things.
Then we have people like Dr. Fauci, who is also a public health policy guy. I mean, how should people outside interpret both you and him being advisors to the president and yet with apparently such different views?
Well, I don't speak for Dr. Fauci at all. He's just one person on the task force. There's several people on the task force, and his background is virology, immunology, infectious disease. That's his approach. It's a very different background. It's a more limited approach. And, I don't speak for him, and I don't speak for anybody. I speak for the interpretation of the data and the subsequent evolution of that data into the best public policy advice that I can give the President of the United States.
So there was a story in the Financial Times, I think a couple of days ago, saying that you are now advocating a herd immunity policy, and that is now the official position of the White House. Is that the case?
No. It's a repeated, distortion, lie, whatever word you want to say. Frankly, I didn't really read the piece. I used to have time to read the Financial Times, but I don't have much time these days. But in any event, there's some kind of a, strange distortion, a persistent sort of attempt to characterize my advice and the policy of the White House and the policy of other people into something that some people have called a herd immunity strategy, quote unquote. And what they mean by that is survival of the fittest, let the infection spread through the community, and then develop a population immunity. That's never been the policy that I've advised. That's never been the policy that's ever even been discussed inside the White House, not even for a single minute. And that's never been the policy of the President of the United States or anybody else here. So I have to say that I've said that many, many times. I've explicitly and precisely in these words and even stronger words denied that is a policy or a recommendation of me. Yet it persists like so many other things, hence the term that the president is fond of using called fake news, because it's an accurate term.
So I guess I have to ask, what is your advice to the president if it's not
my
that?
policy, my advice is exactly this. It's a three-pronged strategy. Number one, aggressive protection of high-risk individuals and the vulnerable, typically elderly and those with comorbidities. Number two, allocate resources so that we prevent hospital overcrowding so that people can be treated for this virus and also get the other serious medical care that is needed. And number three, open schools, societies, and businesses, because keeping them closed is enormously harmful. In fact, it kills people. That's the strategy. That is very different from just saying, open the barn door, as we say in the United States, and let an infection spread through the community. That's never been the policy. I've never recommended that. But what I have done, and what everyone else who understands basic immunology is understand that population immunity is a biological phenomenon that occurs. It's sort of like, if you're building something in your basement, it's down on the ground because gravity puts it there. It's simply, it's not a strategy to say that herd immunity exists. Herd immunity is obtained when a certain percentage of the population becomes resistant or immune to an infection, whether that is by getting infected or getting a vaccine or a combination of both. In fact, if you don't believe that herd immunity exists as a pathway to block, as a way to block the pathways to the vulnerable in an infection, then you would never really advocate or believe in giving widespread vaccination. That's the whole point of it.
Is it fair to say?
So I didn't want to play this entire clip. I'm going to pull out of here and get back over to Twitter because I had some other stuff I wanted to share with you. But the importance here, and what I think is really important, is that we are aware that there's information out there, like go to the source, because the media is taking and spinning things or suppressing information. And that to me is hugely problematic in our country, that this is happening right now. And I want you guys to think about the Sherman-Mundt Act and the National Defense Authorization Act in 2012, where they put that in. What they did is they amended the Sherman-Mundt Act, which was basically an act that stopped the government it prevented the government, our government, from using propaganda on the American people, and instead using propaganda on foreign people outside of America to paint a better picture of America than what it actually is. And I think both things are wrong, right? Because we're going to use propaganda to sell some nonsense to other countries. Why not just tell the truth? Propaganda is propaganda. So, but they're taking that and they're using propaganda upon the people of the United States. And this is happening on the mainstream, and people get very, very upset about this. And it's so evident when you start to look, and you just can't get the basic information. Now, Dr. Scott Atlas is a very well-trained, qualified person to be advising the president. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but the way the media spins it, and you just heard it out of his own words, the way that they're spinning what his suggestions are and what his advice is completely different. And he's definitely against lockdowns. They're worse than the virus. He's into his advice is to protect the elderly and the vulnerable, and let the healthy and the people who want to open up their businesses and children go back to school, which seems very sound to me. And I'm going to share a video with you later of Sweden, who did just that. But before I go there, I wanted to take you guys back over to Twitter and share with you some other important stuff that I came across today. So it's extremely alarming. So this is a study. Now this is James Tirado. He is a medical doctor, and he was actually part of the White Coat Summit that happened in Washington, D.C. Earlier this summer. And that's been suppressed. So the doctors, the White Coat Summit doctors, their Vimeo channel was just totally taken down. They've had problems with their website. So the censorship across big tech is profound. And anything connected to Google, which is got its tentacles in like everything. Google's just, this monster. And actually the good news is that there's an antitrust case being brought up by the DOJ against Google. That's good news. I don't know if you guys heard that. I should do a whole show on that, but you could go look that up. So yes, the DOJ is filing an antitrust against Google. Thank God. Please do that, because these tech giants, they're not for... They say that they want to suppress fake information and fake news, but that's not true. They want to suppress the information that doesn't go along with their agenda. So here is a very powerful example of this. This is, so the Lancet, JAMA, and the New England Journal of Medicine all reject publication of a large scientific study on the efficacy of masks. And so... he goes on to write, my suspicion is they don't want to publish because the results are dangerous, as it shows masks are ineffective. Looking forward to reviewing the preprint, though. So this is going to be coming out. I'm going to have my eyes on this and follow. If you're on Twitter, I highly recommend you follow James Tirado. He tweets out some great information. He is a doctor that was part of the White Coat Summit that happened earlier this summer, that came out and publicly stated that they did not agree with the lockdown measures, that they had treatments and means of helping people with coronavirus. And what's really fascinating too is that there are quite a few treatments that are available for people who get the coronavirus and are sick with it, and very hopeful treatments. Like the early stages of the virus, hydroxychloroquine has shown to be very, very effective based on what these White Coat Summit doctors were talking about. And Dr. Stella Emanuel treated hundreds of people using hydroxychloroquine. And what does the media do? They spin her religious beliefs as a reason to not listen to her as a medical doctor who is actually physically treated patients. Instead, they spin this narrative that her religious beliefs that don't align with most or whatever, they're going to use that instead of actually going with what matters. That's a problem. So they're trying to assassinate her character. But the fact remains that hydroxychloroquine is not political, but it has become political. But if we take the politics out of the medication, it's been around for over 60 years. It has been prescribed to millions and millions of people around the world. In fact, hydroxychloroquine, you don't even need a prescription going to certain countries that have high rates of malaria. They sell it over the counter because it is a very effective drug against malaria. It's also been a very effective drug for people with COVID, according to doctors like Dr. Stella Emanuel, who treated people with hydroxychloroquine and has been advocating for them to make it more available to the public and put it so it could even be purchased like Tylenol or ibuprofen can. And actually, the side effect ratio of hydroxychloroquine, when taken in the appropriate dosage, is less than things like Tylenol, which is pretty wild. So I'm going to take you guys back over here and share my screen. So this was tweeted out by James Tirado, MD. Like I said, he was part of the White Coat Summit. So you can check this out. Follow him on Twitter. I highly recommend it. He puts out some good stuff and very informative. So there's more stuff that I wanted to share. So this was the one that I wanted to talk about as well. So it turns out that the CEO of Sinohawk Holdings, which was a partnership between the Chinese operating through the CEFC, Chairman Yi, and the Biden family, just spilled the beans. And the Biden crime family, he puts that hashtag there. But what's going on is that Twitter again is censoring this information and blocking it. So when I went to go retweet this article, I was getting a strange prompt saying, headlines aren't the article, but I was reading a bunch of the article, which is in here, where you could see that he took photographs of it, because it's not easy to post these articles about what's coming out of Hunter Biden's laptop. And it is relevant. Not the fact that he was doing crack. That's irrelevant, okay? The fact that Hunter Biden has a drug problem is irrelevant to this argument. What is relevant to Joe Biden and why this matters a lot, and even if all it was Hunter Biden was smoking crack, the Twitter does not have a right to censor that information, okay? It's irrelevant to the presidential election, but it should not also be censored. But it's not. It's not just Hunter Biden smoking a crack pipe, okay? This is from an official, and he goes on to say, he says, Hunter Biden called his dad the big guy, or my chairman, and frequently referenced asking him for his sign-off or advice on various potential deals that they were discussing. I've seen President Biden saying he never talked to Hunter about his business. I've seen firsthand that it's not true, because it wasn't just Hunter's business. They said they were putting the Biden family name and its legacy on the line. So, whatever your political thoughts are on this, my point is with this is that the media is censoring this very explosive information, and it's extremely concerning that what we're seeing here, based on the laptop and the emails that it revealed, is disturbing. And it's even more just, I don't know, it's like double whammo crazy disturbing that you've got the censorship happening, and then what the contents of what they're trying to censor. Because if Joe Biden and Hunter Biden are doing this, and Joe Biden's using his place as the vice president and a public official, a servant who took an oath to the Constitution of the United States, is actually doing this. This is terrible. This is terrible. And then the fact that the media is censoring this information is mind-boggling. And very, very, very concerning. Just extremely concerning. So it's not only is the media censoring the other scientists and scientific information and data about the COVID, but they're also censoring very important information about political public officials like Joe Biden. Anybody, I don't care who it is. If they can release Trump's tax returns, that's fine. They release it, it's published, it's printed, and it's out, and everybody can see, and people can make their own opinions. But they let that come out. I mean, I'm saying this is a very interesting observation. In the world of political correctness and cancel culture, you try to have a conversation with some people about this, and they freak out like you're going to blow the election and make Trump win again. I'm not that powerful. I don't have that ability to just magically make Trump win because I'm talking about the candidate running against him, Joe Biden, and on these very concerning emails that come out of his son's laptop. So we have to have these conversations, okay? So the point being is that the president is president for another 4 years. These things that are continuously ignored make the snowball into this effect where, there's a lot of things about Hillary Clinton that are not being addressed. And I'm very upset that we just keep letting it go. And then this stuff comes out with Joe Biden. It's all very similar, where they're using their power as representatives of, this country, as leaders, senator, presidents, vice presidents, all these positions in the United States, and in using that with foreign agents for backroom deals and financial gain for yourself personally is problematic. And if we don't deal with these things as a society and say, hey, wait a minute, back it up, we're letting this escalate into this snowball that there are rules for you and there are rules for them. And that's quite apparent that we are living in that type of system now, which is why, in the first place, the Bill of Rights and Constitution were put together. And I don't understand how that's like synonymous with suppression these days, like, you know, or racism or white supremacy. Slavery was something that happened all around the world, okay? And people were enslaved. All kinds of people were enslaved. And yes, our country was founded with slavery, and it's a terrible, awful thing, but it was all over the world. And it's that part of our existence is over, and the Constitution was a tool that was used to help with, you know, to gain the freedom of other human beings. And the Constitution and the Bill of Rights were tools for women to get the right to vote. So let's not say that our Constitution and Bill of Rights is something that is right-wing, white supremacist. That is so bad, because it's not. It's not. And the Constitution, the most beautiful thing about it is it recognizes all human beings are created equally and have God-given rights, not government-given rights, God-given rights. So we have the God-given inalienable rights to think for ourselves, to be able to read all kinds of science, not just science that the mainstream or a certain agenda wants you to see. But we are endowed with these basic rights, and it's really unfortunate to see how the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and the history, like let's look at the Amistad, which was the slave ship that everybody in Connecticut knows this story, or at least should know this story, where they had captured a bunch of people in Africa. Another tribe traded in another tribe's people, so they kidnapped the Africans from Africa, and the tribe that sold the other tribe into slavery, they were also Africans. So it was Africans selling Africans into slavery, and what it was is that you could see that power corrupts and can make people do horrendous things. It's not based on the color of your skin, you know? So yeah, there's slavery, and all kinds of people have been enslaved, and Africans were selling Africans to Spaniards who were coming around and selling slaves to the Americans. It's a terrible, awful point in human history. But what I think that shows is that corruption and greed and hate and the ability for one class of people to take over another class of people and put them into slavery is absolutely terrible. So anyway, with the Amistad, these Africans were put on a ship against their will, kidnapped, and sent, you know, over to the United States. That's where they were headed. And the Africans were able to escape, and they took over the ship, but they never had dealt with a ship before, so they were guided back. They weren't going back to Africa. They wanted to go back to where they came from, to go back to their homeland. And this is such a powerful story. So they ended up coming here to, you know, to Connecticut and porting here and being here. And what's really exciting is how the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, those Africans that were kidnapped from their home were freed. It's so sad, though, because they were never able to go back to where they were, because that place had totally changed and everything was different. But they were freed. And they were freed because they won in a court of law with our basic laws, this Constitution that gives all human beings the right to be free. Men and women of every color, race, creed, everything. So it really upsets me when people get offended by the fact that I have for my backdrop the Constitution and the American flag. And I just wanted to clarify on that as I come to an end of this story. And one of the most important things that our Constitution and our Bill of Rights guarantees us is the right to free speech and a free press. And right now we're not experiencing a free press at all. This is absolutely terrible. I'm going to share the screen with you guys again. This is absolutely terrible what is happening right now, and it should give us all a huge pause and sigh, like, oh my gosh, this is just here's another one I want to talk. This is also talking about the Danish study, and it's really important that we that this stops. This is terrible. Why? Why are they suppressing this valuable information? So let me read this tweet to you. To be clear, the Danish study is the most important research on masks. If it shows they don't work, we need to know so we can try other solutions. If it shows that they're harmful, we need to know so we don't tell people to wear them. Politics can't hold health hostage. Publish. I couldn't agree with that statement more. I mean, that is absolutely powerful statement that they are suppressing this really important study, this Danish study. And I just want to also point out that the Netherlands they have no mandates on masking. They don't mask mandate, and they said the masks don't even work. They don't have the medical or scientific data to back up the, even suggesting that the public be wearing masks. So that's just something to consider and think about. And I never thought in a million years that we'd ever come to the place where we are today, where breathing the air, just breathing the air has become something where when I go to the store later today, I hate going to the store. But when I go to the store later today, I have to deal with the fact that I go in without a mask and people treat me like I'm, selfish or a scourge, or they don't look at me. I don't look at them. It's terrible. Where it used to be, you smile at people, say hello to people. Now it's so awful. And this depiction that people like me not wearing a mask, and I have many reasons for not wearing a mask, are depicted as selfish or virus spreaders. And I was listening to NPR yesterday, and I used to be an avid NPR listener, but I was so appalled by the reporting. They were interviewing a writer for the New York Times who was talking about, he was hopeful for the future, and, he's just the whole thing about the masking and, people who don't wear masks, they're keeping the virus around, and none of this is based in science. And it was just really, I don't listen to NPR and haven't listened to NPR in many, many years. I known that the National Public Radio has been compromised. Follow the money. Just follow the money. I'm not going to get that far into it, but it was just like all the same narratives, super spreaders, selfish, contact tracing. We have to mask you up. You cannot mask yourself from a virus micron. You just cannot do it. If you go and even read the OSHA guidelines, which have been suppressed for this narrative, which should disturb every citizen in this country, that the OSHA guidelines are being ignored and suppressed right now to push a narrative that isn't even based in science. And they're suppressing the information. The more science that comes out, they suppress the information. They even take articles that were published and perfectly sound articles, well researched, and they've suppressed them as well. It's like they're scrubbing the internet so that you only have access to information, a very small amount of information controlled by these powerful entities, this billionaire class of people. Just follow the money. Follow the money and make your own conclusions about that. You go and you look and see where the funding is. Go check out the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and check out how much money they've been pumping into journalism. If you go in there and you see how much money the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are giving out on a daily basis to journalism, you would be shocked. In fact, it was in WikiLeaks, God bless Julian Assange, who still sits rotting in a jail cell. WikiLeaks had published information, and you can go check out WikiLeaks at wikileaks.org, where you can look up all this information. There's troves and troves of information that WikiLeaks has put out there that the public can go and access themselves. So WikiLeaks was saying in 2008, they had discovered that the Gates Foundation was very concerned. Bill Gates was very concerned about his reputation with publications like Mother Jones, and he gives a list of publications. It's very interesting because that narrative has changed completely now. Mother Jones definitely stands behind the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and the type of narrative that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are controlling with their money by using their money to gain a monopoly on information. and a monopoly on medical practices. It's very scary. So this is the last thing I want to show you guys, and I'm going to close this out. So this is a video that's this is a video of Sweden. Now, you're never going to get the whole story accurately here in the United States unless you're digging around for it, or you go off the beaten path to other journalists who are not in the mainstream, because you're just not going to get that kind of information. So here it is. I'm going to share this with you. Hold on, this is the video. So I'm going to share screens. Hold on a second while I grab this screen and play this for you. This is Sweden, by the way. No masks. This is recently, too. This is Sweden, right now. A country where scientists decided the virus is not worth shutting down people and whole, it's just not worth it to do that, to shut down the entire, economy and force people out of work and not able to pay their bills. That's not good public health policy. And censorship is not good public health policy. So all these things that these tech giants are getting away with, taking this technology, monopolizing it, using it for their own agenda instead of having it be a source of all ideas and voices to put out this information and let thinking people make decisions. Because we are all endowed with the ability to think for ourselves, and we don't want to be controlled by a technocratic class who suppresses information. That is a form of slavery in it of itself. I'll leave you guys with that and finish out. So think about it. Sweden's back to normal, and they're thriving there. So it's just pretty amazing. We can do the same here in the United States. And this is not just the United States problem. If you look to other countries, especially places like Australia, it's really, really bad there. Canada, they have FEMA camps being built, forced quarantines, masking. If you've heard our governor here in the state of Connecticut recently stating that we were going to be in masks forever. Well, not forever, but till there's a vaccine. So I'll leave you thinking on that one for now. Till then.